Deep in Redwood National Park, a campfire crackled, casting flickering shadows among the towering trees. Four friends, Emily, Jake, Sophia, and Ben, huddled closer to the warmth, their faces illuminated by the flames. They had been planning this camping trip for months, a much-needed escape from the city's routine. Above, a canopy of stars twinkled like a million tiny diamonds scattered across a black velvet cloth. Little did they know, their peaceful retreat was about to take a turn for the bizarre. As the night deepened, the shadows cast by the fire grew longer and more distorted. The laughter subsided, replaced by hushed tones as the friends exchanged stories of their day's adventures. Jake dismissed the growing unease as a trick of the light and the lateness of the hour. Sophia recounted a local legend about the redwood forest, tales of a mysterious creature that roamed the woods. Even Ben, usually the life of the party, seemed subdued, his gaze darting nervously into the darkness. The wind died down completely, leaving an unnatural stillness hanging in the air. The friends huddled closer together, their earlier lighthearted banter replaced by a tense silence. Emily first noticed the change in the air, a faint smell of ozone growing stronger with each passing second. It was the smell of ozone, the sharp, tangy scent that lingered in the air after a lightning strike. But there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The metallic scent intensified, sending a wave of nausea through Emily. Sophia's voice, usually bright and cheerful, was a shaky whisper as she spoke of the Time Weaver. Jake scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. The unnatural stillness seemed to amplify every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig. Ben, usually the most skeptical, leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the flames. "There are stories," he began, whispers from centuries past. Emily shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The fire had dwindled to a pile of glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows. Sophia continued, her voice barely a whisper, describing the Time Weaver as a being of pure energy. Jake, his usual skepticism shaken, ran a hand through his hair. Ben, his gaze still fixed on the dying embers, spoke in a hushed tone. Maybe some stories are best left untold." A sharp crack echoed through the stillness, like a whip cracking against the silence. The friends jumped, their hearts pounding in their chests. The smell of ozone was overpowering now, sharp and acrid. The air shimmered, a distortion rippling through the space between the trees. The light coalesced, taking on a shape, a form, and that's when they saw him. The acrid smell of ozone lingered, even as the blinding light subsided. A figure, tall and slender, emerged from the dissipating smoke. Fear gripped Emily's heart, but her legs wouldn't obey. The figure took a step closer, revealing a garment of strange metallic material. A strange contraption adorned their chest, pulsing with an eerie, rhythmic hum. The stranger was unlike anything they had ever seen. As the figure moved closer, the firelight caught their face, revealing features both familiar and alien. Their eyes seemed to hold the depths of the cosmos within their depths. Stars seemed to ignite and die within their irises. Galaxies spiraled into existence and then winked out. Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The stranger opened their mouth, and a voice, thin and reedy, filled the silence. "Greetings," the voice rasped. "I apologize for the abruptness of my arrival." Emily, her heart pounding, found her voice. Who are you?" she stammered. The stranger tilted their head, considering the question. "I am known as Xylos," they replied, "and I come from a time far removed from your own." Jake stepped forward. "From the future?" he asked. Xylos nodded slowly. "Yes, the future. Or perhaps your past." Xylos, with a sigh, gestured towards the dying embers of the campfire. "Might I?" they asked. Ben hastily shifted a log, creating a space for their unexpected guest. Xylos lowered themselves with surprising grace. "It began," Xylos started, with a ripple, a tremor in the fabric of time itself. We, in our hubris, had thought we had mastered the flow of time. Xylos fell silent, their gaze fixed on the dancing flames. The friends, holding their breath, dared not break the silence. There were whispers. Even then, Xylos continued, legends whispered through the ages. Tales of a place, a nexus point where the veil between times thinned. Xylos looked up. Your world, little one, calls it the Redwood Forest. Emily shivered, a cold dread gripping her heart. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackling fire and the soft rustling of leaves as a light breeze whispered through the ancient trees. Emily could hear the frantic beating of her own heart, could feel the blood pounding in her ears. The impossible was unfolding before her very eyes, and she couldn't tear her gaze away from Xylos, this enigmatic traveler lost in time. We, in our arrogance, Xylos continued, their voice regaining strength, dismissed these whispers as mere superstition, the ramblings of primitive minds unable to comprehend the complexities of temporal mechanics. Xylos shook their head, a gesture of ancient sorrow. We built our machines, our temporal compasses, convinced of our mastery over time's currents. We were wrong. A low groan emanated from the device on Xylos's chest, the intricate gears and glowing wires flickering erratically. The air crackled with a sudden surge of energy, the smell of ozone sharp and biting. Emily instinctively drew back, fear warring with a strange sense of fascination. The Redwood Forest, Xylos continued, their voice strained now. It sings, you see. A song of time, a melody woven from the threads of existence itself. Our machines, they were not designed for such a symphony. Xylos clutched at their chest, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The compass, it malfunctioned. The air crackled, a tangible wave of energy emanating from Xylos and their malfunctioning temporal compass. The dying embers of the fire leaped into a sudden roaring blaze, casting grotesque shadows that danced wildly on the surrounding trees. The smell of ozone intensified, a metallic tang that made Emily's eyes water. Xylos slumped back, their eyes wide and unseeing, their breath coming in shallow gasps. The temporal compass, once a beacon of pulsating light, sputtered erratically, its intricate gears whirring and clicking like a frantic heartbeat. Emily watched, a mixture of terror and morbid fascination holding her captive, as Xylos's form flickered, their body becoming translucent, a ghostly image superimposed against the backdrop of the forest. The echoes, Xylos gasped, their voice a strained whisper that seemed to come from a great distance. They're pulling me apart. Their hand shot out, reaching for Emily, their fingers passing right through her arm, sending a jolt of icy energy through her body. Sophia screamed, a high-pitched sound that echoed through the stillness of the ancient forest. Jake, his usual bravado forgotten, scrambled backwards, tripping over a fallen log in his haste to get away. Only Ben seemed rooted to the spot, his gaze fixed on Xylos with an expression of horrified fascination. The forest around them seemed to warp and twist, the towering redwoods swaying rhythmically, as if dancing to a silent ancient melody. The air shimmered with a strange energy, a kaleidoscope of colors swirling and merging, creating fleeting glimpses of impossible landscapes and creatures that defied description. For a fleeting moment, Emily thought she glimpsed a towering city of shimmering metal and glass, its spires reaching for a sky filled with not one, but 3 moons. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a vista of rolling grasslands where creatures resembling giant, feathered serpents soared lazily in a sky of perpetual twilight. Sounds, alien and disorienting, filled the air. The rhythmic chirping of crickets morphed into the buzzing hum of unseen machinery. The distant hoot of an owl transformed into a series of guttural clicks and whistles that could have come from some monstrous insect. The very fabric of reality seemed to be unraveling, the boundaries between past, present, and future dissolving into a chaotic soup of temporal energy. Emily felt herself being pulled along, caught in a riptide of temporal turbulence. The campsite, her friends, the familiar world she knew, all fading into the distance, replaced by a dizzying kaleidoscope of sights and sounds that made her head spin. As suddenly as it began, the chaos subsided. The air stopped shimmering, the strange sounds faded into the background noise of the forest, and the impossible landscapes dissolved back into the familiar darkness of the redwood forest. Emily stood, shaky and disoriented, her senses reeling from the sensory overload. The fire had returned to its previous state, a pile of glowing embers casting long dancing shadows. Jake and Sophia were huddled together, their faces pale, their eyes wide with lingering terror. Ben was picking himself up off the ground, brushing dirt and pine needles from his clothes, a dazed expression on his face. And Xylos. Xylos was gone. Where? Emily stammered, her voice hoarse, her throat dry. Where did they go? Jake, his voice shaky, gestured to the empty space by the fire. I don't know, he whispered, his gaze darting nervously around the now still forest. 1 minute they were there, the next, poof! Gone. Sophia, her voice trembling, pointed a shaking finger at the temporal compass, which lay on the ground, silent and dark. Their thingamajig. It stopped glowing. Ben, ever the pragmatist, even in the face of the inexplicable, bent down and picked up the device, turning it over in his hands. Well, he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. That was definitely not in the brochure. He held up the temporal compass, examining it with a newfound curiosity. You think this thing takes AA batteries? Emily stared at the spot where Xylos had been sitting just moments before, her mind struggling to grasp the situation. 1 minute they were face to face with a time traveler, a being from a future beyond imagining. The next, nothing. It was as if Xylos had never existed, their presence nothing more than a figment of their collective imagination. The silence, once broken by Xylos' strange tales and the crackle of their malfunctioning temporal compass, was now deafening. The only sounds were the soft whisper of the wind through the ancient redwoods and the distant hoot of an owl, the familiar sounds of the forest somehow both comforting and unsettling after the bizarre events of the past few minutes. Do you think, Sophia began, her voice barely a whisper, do you think they'll come back? Her eyes darted nervously around the campsite, as if expecting Xylos to materialize out of thin air at any moment. Jake, still pale but regaining some of his usual bravado, shook his head. I doubt it, he said, trying to sound nonchalant. Probably just some weirdo in a Halloween costume, messing with our heads. He kicked at the dirt with the toe of his boot, a nervous gesture that belied his attempt at nonchalance. Ben, still holding the now inert temporal compass, chuckled softly. Yeah, right, he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Because nothing says realistic prank like a malfunctioning time machine and a lecture on the temporal mechanics of the redwood forest. Emily, still shaken but feeling a strange sense of relief, let out a shaky laugh. Ben was right. The bizarre experience was over. Xylos, the time traveler, was gone. They were left with a story that would grow more fantastic with each retelling. She looked at her friends, their faces illuminated by the embers. Fear lingered, mixed with wonder. Jake broke the silence, regaining his confidence. I'm ready to pack it in for the night. He stretched, joints popping. And maybe lay off the scary stories for a while. Sophia giggled, her cheerfulness returning. Agreed, she said, eyes sparkling with fear and excitement. Who needs campfire stories when you've got real-life time travelers? Ben tossed the temporal compass, catching it deftly. Let's head back and Google this Time Weaver thing. We might be sitting on a Pulitzer Prize-winning story. Emily laughed, a genuine laugh bubbling up. For the first time, she felt normalcy returning. The world hadn't ended. The forest still held its secrets, and they moved on. Dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold as the friends packed up their campsite. The forest, bathed in the soft light of a new day, seemed almost ordinary, the events of the previous night nothing more than a strange and vivid dream. Almost. Emily couldn't help but glance back at the spot where Xylos had materialized. The temporal compass was gone, of course, tucked away safely in Ben's backpack, a tangible reminder of their encounter with the impossible. Had it all really happened? Sophia said, breaking the silence. I've never been a big believer in anything, really. But after last night? She trailed off, shaking her head. Jake grunted as he hefted his backpack. We were tired, he said, his voice gruff. Our imaginations were running wild. That's all. But even he couldn't quite hide the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The forest held an undeniable air of mystery. Ben, his gaze fixed on the path, smiled enigmatically. Or maybe Maybe the universe just likes to remind us every now and then that there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. As they drove away from the campsite, the rising sun cast long shadows like ghostly fingers. Emily felt a part of her would forever remain in the redwood forest. The world seemed unchanged. Traffic was still a nightmare, and the city buzzed with relentless energy. But for Emily, Jake, Sophia, and Ben, nothing would ever be the same. They had faced the unknown and emerged changed. The memory of Xylos, the time traveler, would forever be etched in their minds. As they drove towards the city, the familiar skyline rose in the distance. They couldn't help but smile, a shared secret glinting in their eyes. They had a story to tell, a story that would forever bind them together, a testament to the night the impossible changed their lives forever.